Good morning, everybody. I'm actually on my way to go hang out with our old buddy CORNDOG. Driving through central Nebraska right now. Gonna meet up with Brody, and then we're gonna drive about 45 minutes to the piece of public land that him and his brother and his dad have been hunting the last couple of years. Brody and I have talked about this piece a lot, and this past year they had a lot of success there, so I'm excited to kind of talk about what he's learned by hunting there the last couple of years. Obviously these guys are killing bucks. They're on bucks every time they go out to hunt, but I'm excited just to get in the woods in Nebraska. This is a part of the state that I've never been to before, so it's gonna be pretty interesting. We're gonna be in a river bottom, and what I think is cool about this river bottom, based off what I've learned from Brody and what I've seen on the maps, it's gonna have some unique features, but it's also gonna have a lot of features that you could use pretty much across the country while hunting river bottoms. I gotta figure out which way I gotta turn here. Taking a left, I'm 4 minutes away. I'll sign out here. When I see you next, we'll be 4 minutes down the road hanging out with Brody. All right, guys, made it here. Brody made me some coffee. He's a good guy. But Brody's gonna show me his buck that he shot this year. If you haven't seen that, we'll put a link below. Check it out. It's an awesome hunt. Probably one of the coolest self-filmed hunts that I've seen in a while. So this way. Hey, we're going this way. It kind of looks like a person standing there. Dude, nice. Dude, yeah, that's sweet. That is crazy about his forehead.
It's like real close together. Like I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Like his skin was like bunched up in there. Like it was crazy. And this little, whatever that deal is.
That is crazy. That's a sweet buck, dude. I bet you weren't very excited when that happened.
Not at all.
What's the story on these guys?
This is Dad's rifle buck from last year.
Nice.
Chance mounted that one, and then that's Dad's buck from a long time ago. And then that's also Dad's buck. Chance's snow goose.
You guys probably get them flying right through here, don't you?
Yep. In a couple,
Sweet.
in a month or so.
Yeah. If you've never been through Nebraska when the snow goose, the migration's happening, it's like one of the wildest things I've ever seen.
Those are that limping one or whatever that we talked about. Those these ones. But like this down here, like what is going on with all that?
Hey. If you guys haven't seen the video where, I guess any of the videos where Brody or his brother Chance have seen this buck, but they saw him bedded by the river in September, right? Mm-hmm. We're gonna go to that same area today. This buck to me is kind of like the legend of this spot that we're going to. And we'll cut the camera, and Brody and I are gonna tell all the secrets of this spot to each other, and then we'll see you guys out there in a little bit. A lot more snow up here. I'll tell you what, it's a lot different than what I thought. Not expecting this much terrain at all.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Apparently they do go up and down this thing though.
Oh yeah. All right, man, why don't you tell them kind of what we got going on here?
Well, we're headed in. Straight back in here is where we've done most of our hunting, kind of on this southern side. The buck that I shot's just down in here, so we'll go in there, and then we'll move farther back in there, look at the high wall spot, and then work our way north and just try to, I guess, figure out some more stuff. We're still kind of confused as to where we think those bucks are bedding back in there, and just kind of get a better understanding of what the deer are doing over there. And something that's kind of unique about this spot and where I killed that buck is that we're only about 200 yards from the cars back there. So we'll look at this stuff that's 200 yards from the car, that's good stuff to hunt, and then we'll push even farther back and get into other good stuff. So some overlooked stuff that, I mean, people are driving by it all the time, but yet it's still good stuff here, and then we'll go even farther back in there and get into some other good stuff.
All right, let's see you go down this thing.
Probably sit and slide down.
All right, here we go. That's cold on the back.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so I just filmed Brody go across this ice. I think one of the reasons that these guys have been able to have success back in this spot is because this is an old meander of the river. There's a bigger river for this area over to my right, and this is just an old cut off part of the river. Rivers sometimes will just cut off meanders that they have, and this is just all water. We're just standing on ice right now, so a lot of the season, you're not getting a lot of guys. That's probably why nobody hunts back here, right?
Like last year, there was water in here during the year. So
Yeah.
like, even if it's just above your ankles, they're still not walking through some of that stuff.
I mean, you guys call it the dry river, but it's not. I mean, it's just a big slough. You know,
Yeah.
it's the same thing as a
Wetland
slough.
type stuff.
Yeah, and it's sweet. I mean, it keeps a lot of people out of there.
And the big thing even is not even walking in. It's that they have to drag it out,
Mhm.
go up that big high wall, or they have to drag it, half
Way-
mile that way.
right.
Like, that's the biggest thing is the work that happens after they shoot one. I think that keeps them from coming back.
Yeah, it's sweet. So why don't you give us actually just a quick rundown of like what exactly happened in that hunt? Like I said, we'll put a link in this video below to where you can watch the full hunt, but just kind of walk us through real quick what exactly happened. Essentially a bump and dump.
Yep. So Chance and Dad were hunting farther back in this property where we will be later, but we have to walk through here to get back there. Walk through in the morning, hunted back there. There was nothing in here. But then on their way out, they were walking out and bumped that big buck out of its bed right up here. So once they did that, they went in and figured out right where he was bedding, stood there, figured out like what trees we could be in, and marked it, and came out and told me. So then I waited probably 3 or 4 days just to give him some time, because he might not have been back in there right away. Just give him time to come back. Came back in, hunted once, didn't see anything, but I trusted the sign because there were so many beds and rubs. I was like, there's got to be bucks bedding in here. Came back the next day, and he came back in with another buck, and we were able to kill him.
That's sweet.
Yep.
Yeah, so we're gonna go up here to the spot, check it out. You can already kind of see once we're standing at the edge of this ice, once you get in there a little bit, it starts to raise up. And on that little rise right there is where you said most of the beds are. Basically from that point on, we're gonna be potentially bumping deer. So
you'll be able to see them because it's in that horsetail stuff.
Yeah.
And with the snow, there's probably fresh beds in there.
oh yeah, there's fresh tracks.
So that tree that Zach just panned off of is the tree that I was in when I shot that buck. He came from back here the way we walked in, and just walked through this horsetail grass, got down in here into a bed actually, and that's why I was able to get the shot because of this tall horsetail grass, but not that far from where we walked in. So
Do you think that he was gonna go bed right there?
I think so. He was gonna bed in here somewhere. Those you can kind of see those 3 cottonwood trees. That's where Chance and Dad bumped him. And there's just, there's a bed here, and there was a bed back here and over there. So they were just in this area. It wasn't really wind specific either, I don't think, which is kind of something we've learned down here in this horsetail grass. Is it's not. They just bed so they can kind of see where they think people are coming from, and then they just bed where they want to. It's so thick.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, here's the most interesting thing to me. There's that high wall that we came from. And your tree is right there, that big cottonwood.
Yep.
And the beds are here. I mean, from this bedding location, right on this, especially that little high point right there where he was going, it's like he can see that whole hillside.
And if you hear something, he can stand up and look. You're going to be skylined on that high wall. So, before you even get down in here, he can be back in there, and you don't even know he existed.
Even specifically watching that trail that we came down.
Because it's the only place you can cross on this south side here. And the one common thing that we've seen down here for bucks and where they're bedding is that where there's this horsetail grass, there's bucks and there's buck beds. And Jake had talked about it last year on a podcast that you guys did, and even Zach said it today. It's in Ohio and then up there in Wisconsin where Jake is, and it's down here, and it just kind of grows where it's wet, and it's pretty invasive, so it kind of takes over stuff, but apparently the deer like it. They eat on it all year round, and there's always lots of water in it. So you find this horsetail grass where you're at, it's worth a look because there's probably buck beds in it. And you talk about all the time like bucks needing everything that they want in one place, and they have it. They can stand up and eat on this. It's got the water in it, and they feel secure, so they don't gotta move if they don't want to during the day.
Cool. So Brody just brought up a pretty interesting point about this horsetail grass. If you look here, we're on a deer trail. And that's matted down to where we can sneak down this pretty quietly. But if you look off to this side, that stuff is just a tangled mess. And when you step in it, it's super loud. But if you're on a deer trail, like here, you can be pretty quiet. So we were just talking about, you have to really come back in here and map out how you're gonna access these areas, just because it's simply too loud to just kind of go in blind. I would say you almost would be best off to kind of walk a trail to specific spots. If you have specific spots in mind that you want to set up in, you'd be better off, we were talking, almost coming in August, walking through it once just so you know that it's matted down. As long as you have a trail to your spot, it's going to make it a lot more effective.
We had a hunt earlier in the year on our channel where we saw that really big buck in early November, but he was coming to these scrapes here, and when we walked in, we saw all these fresh scrapes kind of along this high wall. It's so flat in here. When you finally have some type of terrain feature, it's really going to affect what the deer do. And they're coming from back that way and moving out to this high wall to go eat, and then they're coming down the high wall this way, going out there to eat. So there's a scrape right here that kind of the deer, as they're all funneling out to that food source at night, can hit. And then, like I said, there's just a line of scrapes that runs down the edge of this high wall, and that's what we set up on in late November, actually, where Dad killed his buck, is setting up along all those fresh scrapes that they're making here. So we usually talk about like several different things that like we look for when we're scouting. Terrain features, like we talked about, is one. The next one is transitions, and you can see a pretty hard transition here from where this horsetail and hardwoods is to just open hardwoods. And the deer are always working right down the edge of those hardwoods, and that's where the scrape line is as well. So that scrape line gets pinched between the terrain features and that transition. So that's why we set up on here when we shot Dad's buck, is because one, the scrapes were there, but we also had this hard transition, and we knew if the bucks were up cruising, they'd follow that transition line, probably trying to hit doe trails that lead back into that horsetail for bedding.
All right, so Brody and I are walking through here, and we're getting back into probably about the deepest part of this piece, right? Mm-hmm. This late into the year, you know, all the seasons are over now here in Nebraska, but they've been getting hit hard for the last, whatever, 3 or 4 months. And we're at the very back of the piece. We've noticed there were some really fresh tracks. And then we noticed right here where the deer came in to this little patch and browsed around. The reason you can tell if they browsed around is their tracks are just kind of meandering around in this spot. There's all kinds of debris from these little plants that's laying on top of the snow. That's telling you that that just happened. Like, this probably happened within the last few hours. And right here, there's a bed. I'll show you close-ups of this stuff. So it looks like they're browsing on this plant. It's all kind of chipped off. But deer browse on a lot of this woody vegetation. Woody browse is their #1 source of food. I mean, it takes up a huge portion of their diet, and I think it's a misconception that they have to be in crop fields to be feeding. You know, these deer are browsing on all this stuff as they move through the woods. They're browsing on the horsetail. They're browsing on this piece of vegetation here. They're browsing on young trees, stuff like that. And that's why hinge cuts are so effective, is because when you hinge cut, you've got woody browse laying on the ground, easy access for the deer to feed. So if you're ever still hunting or just going through scouting, trying to find a place to set up in general, when we're talking about finding hot sign, you're looking for the freshest sign that you can find, telling you that there are deer, you know, in there on that day or have been in there in the past few days. This is hot sign. It's not necessarily buck sign, but that's telling us that there's deer in here. This is a doe bed. It's a small bed. I'm sure if we looked around, there's going to be some more doe beds in this general vicinity. But if you're rut hunting, for example, and you've got a fresh snow, and you're still hunting, trying to find a place to set up, you find a bunch of doe beds like this that are fresh, then you know that the deer are spending time there, and the bucks are also going to know that. We are looking at stuff like that. We're not just going right past it, because that's telling us one bit of information that we can use to set up and hopefully get a shot at a deer. So one of the things that I've learned from these guys hunting back here and just watching their videos and kind of just talking with them about how the deer are using this area in this river specifically is that how often the deer cross. I guess just as a guy that didn't really have access to a lot of river spots when I was growing up, I didn't ever realize how much deer were actually going across these rivers. And in a spot like this, you can look down in the water and you can see, okay, there's some sand down in there. It's obviously shallow, but right here it appears to be pretty deep. You know, I guess I just always assumed that deer didn't want to cross these things. Some of the craziest footage I've ever seen in my life, Brody filmed right on this river, filming just deer going back and forth across this river. Filmed big bucks, little bucks, tons and tons of does going right across this thing. And the deer are using that as a deterrent. You know, they know it's a deterrent for hunters. And there's a lot of hunter access over here. There's a field that's not that far away. And Brody's told me that there's a lot of guys that'll come and hunt those field edges. And in the mornings, he always sees, especially early season, deer coming up and across this river. I always just assumed, really, that, you know, they weren't doing that. They weren't crossing these rivers. I knew they did it, but I didn't know that they did it as frequently as they do. So if you're hunting a river, especially a shallow river like this, one that's not moving very fast, definitely start looking into those river crossings and seeing how the deer could potentially be using them to get away from hunting pressure. Okay, so Brody and I have been working our way through this whole piece, and we're at the very back corner now. Brody and I have been talking about this spot for probably a year and a half, 2 years now. This has always been in the back of my mind, this little corner, this kind of bend of the river, and I'm happy to finally get back here and see it. And as soon as we get back here, you start seeing crazy stuff like this. That's a huge rub on a hackberry tree, and if you know what a hackberry tree is, as far as like bark, that stuff's tough. That buck carved a hole in it, and there's a fresh bed right here. The reason I guess this has always caught my eye is just simply it's the deepest point back in here where a buck can bed here, be close to the river. He can hear anybody coming across the river, and he can smell anybody coming across these fields, see anybody coming across these fields. I mean, he's basically got exactly everything he could possibly need right in this back corner.
Zach has mentioned that fields out that way, probably, I don't know, probably 200, 300 yards or so. And then there's a field back that way.
But
so
they're both private fields,
yes,
correct?
Private fields that you can't hunt. But like, they're both, we both think that they're going to those fields. But if you're set up on those fields, you're probably never going to see the deer that are back here. So we've tried to move a little bit closer and then access, you know, farther back in, crossing the river, getting where those people aren't. And we've seen them come from the food source and then cross that river and then move back in here to some of this stuff.
Yeah, and I think just if to kind of wrap a bow around why a buck would be here and kind of exactly what he does need, he can lay here somewhere in this general area. Maybe not necessarily this bed, but he's going to bounce around this. He's got horsetail. He's got right in there, you can't really see him because it's thick enough, but back in there, there's cedars. Right here, he's got the river. He's got a crop field over there. He's got a crop field over here. He's got does that are moving across this river like crazy every single day. And he can hop up, he can get to the edge of that field pretty quickly. He can browse on horsetail throughout the day. And it's obvious that a buck has just meandered through this spot because we've counted 1, 2, 3, I'll skip ahead and just tell you there's 8 that we can just see standing right in this one spot. So I guess as far as the setup goes in this location, if you could just come up that river, whether you're paddling it, putting waders on and coming up the river, as far as a morning setup goes, if you could just pop in here, set up right off the river, then you could have just deer kind of meandering through this bedding area all morning.
And from what we've seen, it's better on this corner here early season. I mean, those hunts we had obviously showed that, but it's better September when there's less pressure on those fields, less people are in the woods before they start feeling some of that. It's better back here.
And one of the things that we were discussing before we started rolling on the cameras was this is a spot back in this back corner that, you know, setting up on the river and being able to observe all the way down the river, obviously doing that, Brody's seeing shooter bucks, but some of the biggest, oldest bucks could potentially be spending their time in this corner where they think they're safe and never going actually across that river in the open in daylight. The one buck that kind of the legend back here, you know, you've only ever seen him, what, 3 times total or 3 times total going across that river. Obviously he's still in here because I don't think that there's many bucks that are able to make as much big sign that is back in here.
And it makes sense that a buck like that's going to beat you to wherever you're going, because he knows that's the way to stay alive.
And you know, he can lay here, he can monitor all those does coming across, he can hear anything, like I said, I mean, he can hear anything coming into that river. If he needs to bail across the river and escape, he's good. If he needs to run back into the thick stuff for a mile back that way, he can do that too. This is a really cool spot. Hopefully by the example maps that we've shown you, you can get an idea of what we're dealing with back in this area and kind of how Brody and I have decided would be the most effective way to set up on an early season. This spot's pretty crazy. As you can see, lots of sign back in here. They're obviously in here at some point, and they're definitely bedding at some point. So we're gonna work our way back, just kind of scout our way back towards the cars. I'm happy to have finally seen this spot, dude. Like, I think about it a lot. What's up, guys? Sitting here finishing up the editing on this video, and I realized that our last interview got a lot of wind noise, can't really hear us, so I figured I'd close it here. First off, I want to say I had a blast scouting with Brody. Some new stuff that I've never seen before. That's some unique habitat down there, but like I said at the beginning of the video, I think in this river bottom, there's some general movement and bedding patterns that you're going to see in river bottoms pretty much across the country. So hopefully you could learn a little bit from Brody and I's scouting mission. But one thing I want to make sure to mention before the end of this video, please go over to Whitetail Instinct YouTube channel. Give those guys a follow. It's Brody, his dad, and his brother. Those guys are putting a lot of effort into making a lot of really cool content right now. And if you like our stuff, you're for sure going to like their stuff. So go over, give them a follow. They're also on Instagram and Facebook. You can check them out at Whitetail Instinct. I'll put some links in this video. That way you can just go over their page and give them a follow. These guys are really starting to figure this stuff out. They had a lot of success last year. I'm sure they're just going to keep improving and tweaking those setups back in there. And I'm sure they're going to have continued success, but keep checking back. We're going to have more content. I think Jake has got some sturgeon action in the works. He's been up in Wisconsin doing the sturgeon thing up there, so there should be some pretty entertaining videos coming from that. But until next time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.